Good morning. Call the meeting to order for the Economic Growth Infrastructure Committee at 9:33. This time we'll do the first order of business as a roll call.
Jackson? Here. Spiz?
Here.
Markham?
Here.
Howell? Here. Wipert?
Here.
Miller?
Here. We have a quorum. This time can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we'll do the approval of the minutes. Are there any changes of the minutes? Go ahead.
I read the minutes, and there's a place in there where it's talking about the redevelopment of the Wixom property, and it says it's in Novi twice in the minutes, but it's actually in Wixom.
Good catch.
So now
Okay.
you know I actually read the minutes.
Yeah, we'll make that change. You do a voice vote to approve it. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Same. Say nay. Okay. It's approved. Let's see. So the motion carried. Now approval of the agenda. Is there any changes or amendments to the agenda?
I'll move the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Wiper and seconded by Jackson. All in favor, do a voice vote. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carried. So now we'll come to our public comment. And first I would like to, around the room, since it's the first of the year, if we could have everybody just say their name and just a brief description of what they do with the county or in the community. So we just want to start this side, yeah. Jody?
Georgia Kramer, I'm from Human Resources, and under my supervision is benefits, retirement, wellness, recruitment, compensation, and labor relations.
Good morning, Commissioners. Phil Bertolini, Deputy County Exec and CIO for the county. I'm responsible mainly for the Department of Information Technology and the Department of Facilities Management and Operations. From an IT perspective, and I won't steal Mike's thunder, but we have a number of efforts going on that are really going on statewide, regionally, and are very much shared technologies across multiple platforms. We just entered into a new 2-year master plan. We plan all of our IT projects for 2 years. We manage every hour of every day to the quarter hour of our work, so we know exactly what's being worked on and what it's cost and what's needed. And I'm going to bring that master plan back to this committee. We normally do it in January of the first year of the master plan. So I'll bring that back, we'll set some time, and we'll actually go through in detail some of the things that we're doing for the county initiatives. So thank you, nice to meet all of you.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Tim, the Director of IT, and since Phil stole my IT thunder, the one thing that that I would just add to what Phil mentioned is we have been very good with previously the Finance Committee working through. We have several very large projects that are part of that master plan that Phil mentioned. A new ERP system that we're implementing, a new network implementation for the campus that we're implementing. We just finished a new 911 system a year ago, and we have a large radio system that is going out for bid for public safety, and that's for the entire county, not just the sheriff. So there are some very major IT initiatives that we'll be talking to you about, and look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Mike McCready, I'm a Deputy Director, newly appointed to the Executive Office for Economic Development and Community Affairs. I'm a former state representative, represented the 40th District, which is Birmingham-Wilmington Hills. I turned out in the State House and glad to be here.
I'm Malcolm Brown. I'm the Deputy County Executive. I oversee generally the legal department, human resources, labor relations, and I'm in charge of indigent defense for the county, pursuant to the Michigan Indigent Defense Act.
Hi, I'm Lori Taylor, Deputy Director of Human Resources, and I support Verdi in the management of the Human Resources Department.
I'm Heather Mason. I'm in the Human Resources Department,
supervisor over compensation and classification.
Michael Andrews, Board of Commissioners.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Tim Meyer, I'm Deputy County Executive in charge of Economic Development and Community Affairs. We've got a lot of things going on that I look forward to engaging you with. I think it's very important to have a full conversation around a lot of the things that we do that shapes the future of this county and our families in particular. My department looks after a lot of federal and state money, including a lot of workforce development, a lot of housing and urban development, and we work very closely with the federal government and the state government in those two venues. We also offer the citizenry and the business community a number of events such as Main Street, which is a community development initiative. We also provide, and that's in our planning department, we also provide for economic development through business development. When we have a full business development unit, we support entrepreneurship with our one-stop program, and we also provide financing through some of our federal programs through SBA. So we've got a lot of things that are going on that we need to coordinate and provide for our citizenry and our community. And I think it's very important that we have conversations that center around data. And to that effect, and in anticipation of this type of conversations, what I'd like to do is provide you just with a cheat sheet, if you will, that gives you data around our county, and it has two values to it. It has the value of understanding what is, but it also has the value of understanding what could be. And so I'm a very data-driven type of person. I think it's important that we get to a serious conversation to move past a lot of the urban myths that we hold, which keep us in place. So I look forward to working with everyone in the upcoming years. Thank you.
Art Holzberg, Director of Facilities Management. My department is responsible for all the buildings and grounds that we have here on campus, plus at the remote site, which includes all the 52nd district courts, as well as the South Oakland office building, South Oakland Health Center. My department has roughly 200 employees. We're responsible for building safety, such as campus patrols, answering telephones after hours, handling alarm points and things like that. We're also responsible for custodial, mechanical and electrical systems, all the infrastructure on campus except for the IT department's infrastructure. We also handle this capital improvement plan, which is tens of millions of dollars every year, which comes to this committee for review and approval in the spring. So any questions you might have about the buildings or grounds or any issues you might personally have within the buildings, please refer those to me. Thank you.
Commissioners, one thing on capital plan. So we do capital planning in 5-year increments with a 10-year outlook for the capital plan. So you're going to see long-term capital plans both for physical infrastructure and for IT infrastructure that we will bring in front of you to illustrate our investments.
Good morning. Dan Hunter, Deputy Director with Economic Development and Community Affairs. Welcome to new and old commissioners. Tim, you got it. You stole everything. Two other things in the high level. We do some retail sales at our one-stop shop across the street. So we meet with a lot of developers and smaller businesses that are gathering data. And that's always open. And then secondly, on the data-driven, every year we have done an economic forecast that's usually at the Troy Marriott, and we plan to do it again this year on April 26th. So we look forward to seeing you there. I look forward to working with you in many different capacities. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Sherry Happy, and I'm a concerned citizen. I'm here to advocate for mass transit. I believe that mass transit is essential for the economic survival of Oakland County.
Chris Ward, I work for all of you at the Board of Commissioners, otherwise known as Woodworld now.
I like that, I like that. So before we go around the room, I did this purposely. I wanted to introduce Megan and Amy, the new employees. I didn't want them to get like lost in the translation of everybody. So if you guys want to say something
Megan Sellers. This is officially my second week with the Board of Commissioners, and I'm extremely excited. So I'm in training. Nice to see you all again.
Amy Aubrey, I'm an analyst with Board of Commissioners, and it is my second day.
Love it.
Right in the fire.
All right, did you?
I'm Connie Strogi. I'm an analyst for the Board of Commissioners.
I'm Pam Worthington. I'm the committee coordinator.
We have one more behind you that came in.
Ross Gavin, I'm a deputy treasurer in the treasurer's office.
All right. And then, so I just want to move on to the public comment. I believe we have one comment in the public here that Ms. Happy?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to take a few minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To a
That's my
microphone.
fault. Yeah, I forgot all about that.
Again, I'm Sherry Happy. I'm an Oakland County resident, and I want to take a few minutes to talk about why I think mass transit is essential for the economic survival of Southeast Michigan. I think there are several things to consider. First, just as Amazon cited the lack of mass transit as a major reason for rejecting this area for their new headquarters, I think it's safe to assume that other businesses looking to grow will do the same. Without mass transit, no new business will be locating to Southeast Michigan. Secondly, our children are leaving the area. Our kids are graduating from some of the best colleges in the country, and they're moving away. They're moving because they have to. They need to be in places that can provide the mobility to get them to work. Young people don't want to buy cars because they're too expensive. Thirdly, businesses looking to grow will be increasingly stifled by the lack of talent as our children graduate and leave. The best and the brightest are moving away from Southeast Michigan. And going forward, how will the workforce be delivered to existing businesses? SEMCOG has indicated that by the year 2045, there will be a 75% increased need in workers in Oakland County alone. Where will these workers come from? Will existing businesses need to flee to get the workforce they need to do their business? I believe that all of these facts contribute to a looming economic disaster for Oakland County and all of Southeast Michigan. As we lose business and cannot mobilize a workforce, our entire communities will fall into economic depression. Other things we must consider. Oakland County has one of the fastest growing aging demographics. By the year 2025, 25% of the population in Oakland County will be 65 or older. I believe our families and our elders need the improved quality of life that mobility will provide. Additionally, as we need to consider that people with disabilities are trapped in their homes. As a matter of ethics and morality, it is our responsibility as a community to provide for those that require special care.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Could I ask Ms. Happy something?
Mr. Jackson.
You quoted a stat from SEMCOG. Could you please read that sentence one more time? You said 75%?
SEMCOG has indicated that by the year 2045, there will be a 75% increased need in workers in Oakland County alone.
Thank you.
Is there any other, anybody else that wants to address the committee, public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment. And we'll move on to our regular agenda, which is the first item number is the Board of Commissioners Tri-Party Improvement Program fiscal year 2019 appropriation. Charter Township of Springfield shoulder paving on the Andersonville Road for Davisonburg Road to Northwest Court, project number 54661. We need Commissioner Spiz moved. Commissioner Jackson second. Is there any further discussion on item 1?
Good morning, Commissioners. What you have before you today is a resolution authorizing the 1/3 share of funding for a project in the Charter Township of Springfield. As you just mentioned in the title, it's the shoulder paving of Andersonville Road. Their 1/3, or the county's 1/3 share is $59,877, and construction is set to begin in the spring of this year.
Thank you. Questions? Hearing none, call the roll.
Jackson,
Yes.
Spiz,
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Wypert,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
motion carries.
Motion carries. So we'll move on to our second agenda item, which is the appointment of, excuse me, Michael McCready to Director of Economic Development and Community Affairs of Oakland County. We need a motion. It's been moved by Commissioner Spiz. Seconded by Commissioner Wyper. Is there, this is time for any further discussion? No.
Thank you very much, Chair Miller, and good morning, Commissioners. It gives me great pleasure this morning to provide an insight into the appointment of Michael McCready as Director of Economic Development and Community Affairs. As you may or may not know, there is a division in authority in this position where the county executive has the authority to appoint and the commissioners have the authority to confirm. And so we're in the second stage of the process where at the last Board of Commissioners meeting, this appointment was directed into committee as we sit here this morning. What I'd like to do is I'd like to give you just a little bit of the background, and I think I did earlier, on economic development and community affairs and why this is a very important match. Economic development and community affairs requires an in-depth knowledge of both the community and the policy that shapes the community, both from an economic standpoint as far as a community well-being standpoint. That knowledge comes from a long-term experience as well as being responsible for setting public policy and understanding the implications of that public policy that impacts both business and the community. As you probably would see once you get into that information, we're at an inflection point in the future of this community, and that is the economy continues to reshape itself. We see that and we hear that coming forward where some of the stalwarts of our economy now are starting to sputter, and we're starting to see new upstarts. And I offer you the idea of General Electric. General Electric virtually is now off the Dow Jones, where it used to be front and center in one of the top 5 as far as revenue in this country. And it gives you a sense of that change in economic development. We're also seeing it locally with our auto sales and the shape of our North American International Auto Show right now, where that show is being reshaped. That show used to be the premier show where new models of automobiles were, it was the coming out for new models of automobiles. The German interests have now pulled away from that auto show now. So Audi, Volkswagen, and Mercedes are no longer part of that show. So we're starting to see our entire economy and our entire community reshape itself. And it's very important to have an understanding and a guidance to be able to do that in the appropriate manners. In a lot of ways, there are no do-overs when you get to the fundamental conversations around social policy. And having described that, I can think of no other person that is more qualified for the job than Mike McCready. Brooks Patterson in part of his investigation, cast the net wide and far to look at the very best talent that would fit the needs of this community. And he came up with the name of Mr. McCready, which I fully supported because of what we're facing as a community and from a development standpoint. So I can also reference my relationship with Mr. McCready as Chancellor of Oakland Community College. One of the things that I think we all can agree on is the need for workforce development and the need for support for education. And I can tell you Mr. McCready was stalwart in his support for both of those areas, understanding that the supply of talent does 2 things. It develops our community, but it also builds our businesses. So with that, it pleases me to provide both a professional and personal recommendation for Mr. McCready or for the appointment of Mr. McCready into this position, or confirmation rather, into this position. So with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions if there are any.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. Yeah, I met with Brooks on this position, I think it was in the middle of December, and he showed me the opportunity. Then I met with his executive team. I talked a lot about my time in the legislature, what I accomplished in the legislature. My first 4 years in the legislature, I served on appropriations. I chaired Michigan State Police. I was the vice chair of Health and Human Services. I chaired universities, higher education, and also was the vice chair of law, licensing and regulation. I served on the policy committee for transportation, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I championed the tax increase, which not many people admit to raise our gas taxes and registration fees to fix our roads because they're in such crumbling and bad shape. I also fought and will continue to fight the Redo Act 51, which is the formula for all our money goes through, which Oakland County comes up in the short end of. And then in my final 2 years, I served on policy committees, Children and Family Services, where we do a lot to help people in need, both seniors and young foster children in particular, trying to find them homes and care that they need and they deserve. Also served on financial liability, where we dealt with a lot of the pension issues that the state has, which are problems that we had to fix and fill gaps and holes. I voted against changing the teacher pension. I believe teachers deserve the pension. I believe the system that was in place was working fine. I didn't agree with the governor's signature or my caucus members on that. I think public school teachers deserve more than what they're getting today, and to take away pension from them doesn't fit for the pay that they receive. Also served on financial services, and financial services dealing with the banking and the credit unions. They kind of clash every once in a while, so we become a referee. And but one of the biggest issues we have right now with the legalization of marijuana is how we're going to handle the banking situation there, and that's something that the legislature is going to have to work with the federal government, because it's a cash business, and since all the banks and credit unions are federally insured, it makes them illegal to receive the money. So that's an ongoing situation. That's some of my background. I live in Bloomfield Township at Lone Pine and Telegraph, and before that I lived in the city of Bloomfield Hills, where I served on the city commission for 5.5 years, and I served on the zoning board prior to that for about 4.5 years. Thank you.
All right, at this time we'll open it up for questions from the commissioners. First on the list is Dave Woodward, Commissioner Chair Dave Woodward.
Well, welcome, Representative. I, like you, am a recovering legislator. So congratulations. I mean, moving forward. I mean, I think Deputy Executive Meyer lifted up the awesome and tremendous responsibility in this role. And as a county that really is the economic engine for Oakland County, the tremendous amount of responsibility in driving and helping shape the public policy piece, which I hope we get an opportunity to kind of get into today, is really in your hands in this role, in this position. I guess I want to talk about in terms of your prior experience to come into this role. I understand you're also a business. You own a business, McCready Associates, which I'm just pulling it off your website, off the website, providing interior space planning solutions for.
We were manufacturers, commercial furniture manufacturers, so I was more of the middleman.
Okay.
We have the manufacturer, and I represent them to the retailer, and the retailer is the one that provides those services that you mentioned.
Okay.
And we help them with selling and servicing of our products. But I'm currently in a buyout, and I only have 4 years left, and I'm completely out of the business.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit, how does that experience prepare you to lead economic development for the county?
Well, it's a combination of being in business and understanding a little bit about how the business world works and investments that need to take place, but also working in the city government and watching what it takes to have infrastructure, fix your infrastructure, also bring businesses into the community. You know, the county, when I met with Brooks and talked to some others, the best asset that we have are the local communities, and how can we help the local communities to develop their infrastructure and their needs. Working in local government, when I was in Bloomfield Hills, for instance, one of the biggest issues I ran into is we only had about it's only an $8 million budget when I first came into office there was no line items for road repair or road replacement. So that's something we had to tackle. And when you rip up roads, you're really creating jobs for people, and you're creating a better environment that people want to come into and live and work. No one wants to live and work on crumbling roads. When I got to the legislature, guess what? I found a similar situation. Funding for roads was pretty inadequate. And I was right away trying to steer excess money into roads. But I think one of the biggest impacts I probably had, and as a freshman legislature, as a Republican, is the Healthy Michigan program, which was also known as the Medicaid expansion program. When President Obama introduced Obamacare, there was a section in there to provide health care for people who were just above the poverty line. So we did it to 133% of the poverty line. And many people pushed back against that. Well, I'm like, why are we pushing back? That's money that we're sending to Washington that we need to bring back and invest into our state. And by doing that and voting for that and supporting it, we actually pumped in, I believe it was about $1.5 billion into the state's economy through hospitals and health care for those of the people that work that couldn't afford health care for their families, that were suffering from diabetes or other types of ailments, cancer, that they couldn't get help for. So that was a big economic impact, and one that the people who needed the care are getting, and they're on for a certain period of time. So those are some things that we look for to help others and help communities. That we can't be like closed-minded because it's a political principle issue. That doesn't make any sense. What makes sense is how can we help individuals in the economy and look outside the realm of what we may think is a principled approach.
When we think about this position, and particularly you have some big shoes to fill with Irene Spanos and even her predecessor, which brought really extensive direct business experience working in business development. This field, it's been pretty amazing over my 20 years in public service to watch the economic development field professionalize, whether we're talking broadly economic development, community development, redevelopment, tremendous amount of tools that have been developed. Can you speak to me, in terms of, and I can appreciate your policy experience in the legislature and city council. Can you speak to me any direct experience in business development, helping employers attract and retain workers? Direct experience working with those tools that we have available, many that we have available here, and hopefully more that we're going to develop.
Well, in the furniture industry, we were in a really growth pattern while I've been in it, and we were attracting businesses, looking for businesses basically across the state. And usually you'd go to the facilities people, and if they had a real estate department, and you'd work with those groups, and then a buyer normally to help secure and get an opportunity to either bid on a project or to plan a project. So many of the facilities that were going into Michigan, and you can take I remember back in the 80s, we were working on Wayne County, and Wayne County was looking at different buildings to move into, and then they moved into that big, I think it was a big old state building, it's a Wayne County building now, and help them develop a plan and then process for purchasing their furniture, and eventually they bought the furniture and moved everybody in. That was a great opportunity. We worked a lot with General Motors and a lot of their planning of their facilities, both in the Pontiac plant, but remember the Flint days when they were up in Flint quite a bit in Saginaw with Saginaw Steering Gear, and then with the new development down in the Renaissance Center first they were in Detroit, then a Renaissance Center. So we did a lot of the development of the offices and the office buildings, and usually we weren't steering where they were going, but we were following where they were going and helping them plan their facilities and their purchasing processes, and then hoping to steer them in our direction. You may get some of the business, you may get a lot of the business. It just depends on the products and the bidding process that we went through. But then I was also developing retailers across the state of Michigan to sell and service our products. So we would start, normally we could find a small business that was looking for some manufacturer to help build their business, and then we'd work side by side and making calls with them to develop those business opportunities, both from leads that you hear from people, just through basic cold calling, getting on the phone and calling people, finding opportunities, and developing them. And I've worked with many furniture dealers that grew from 500, maybe 1,000 a year in sales up to $100 million a year in sales, and we grew along with them by becoming partners.
I mean, the last question, then we can pass it on to other people. I guess specifically in terms of the economic tools that we help cultivate here, I mean, we've got, do you have any direct experience working with like tax increment financing, tax incentives, tax credits?
Yeah, we did
Economic Development
more
Corporation?
so in the legislature and with city government. I was not a big proponent of tax breaks for businesses. So not in my business as a furniture representative, but in the city of Bloomfield Hills, we'd look at some of the TIFs and see if it fit in. It didn't for the city. We didn't have any. It's 90% residential. But when we got into the state legislature, we looked at numerous programs, that were tax incentives. And so, for instance, there was the only one I really supported was I forget the name of it now, but the jobs it was a jobs program when they were talking about Foxconn coming into Michigan or Wisconsin, some of the other states, and they were doing a tax program where it based on if you hire new people and you average 125% of the pay, then you get collect certain amount of their personal income tax back to pay for it. They did the same thing with the Detroit, jobs program. I think it was called M-Jobs. I forget. Down in Detroit. Mostly it was for Dan Gilbert to get his tax break to build the tower. I voted against that. I thought it was too specific to one individual or one company. I was looking for more broad-based tax programs that would help anybody or any company that was existing or moving into an area. There was another one in Grand Rapids called Switch. I don't know if you remember the data company Switch. Voted against that. It was specifically aimed at one company. So I look at tax increment financing. I understand that, the brownfield developments that we did. And I was very cautious with that because if it was broad-based in nature, Commissioner, yes. If it was singly pointed for one organization I felt for, I usually stayed away from it.
So you say you supported the Foxconn one, but not the other one?
Well, the Foxconn program was really, I think it was a 30-month program. It started in July of 17, and it was specifically, it was geared for larger companies of like a larger amount of employees. It wasn't aimed just at Foxconn. General Motors could take care of it, Ford could take advantage of it, a large real estate firm could take advantage of it, not just one individual developer. But we worked on that to try and bring them into Michigan, and unfortunately, when you look at the tax breaks they received from Wisconsin, it was above and beyond anybody ever expected.
And I think the Wisconsin experiments is proving to be a disaster right now. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I more questions, but I can wait.
So, Commissioner Spiz.
Thank you, Mr. McCready, for coming out, and thank you for all your service. Can you give me, you've lived and dealt with Oakland County for a long time, you probably had an arm's reach, but now you've had a couple weeks to dig in, get into the weeds a little bit more. Can you give me a couple items that you've seen that Oakland County's done very well, and maybe a couple items that you think we could do a lot better?
Well, I think you've done a really nice job over the years of developing and bringing business and people into a county where we have 1.28 million people, and we have a lot of great Main Street programs. Rochester, you go into Ferndale has really grown tremendously. Royal Oak is outstanding. It's done a great job with their community. It's fabulous when you go down there. I know, like my daughter who graduated from college in April wanted to live downtown, and she got a job in Birmingham, so she's living in Birmingham, but she and her friends spent a lot of time in Ferndale. They seem to like the nightlife in Ferndale and what's going on down there. And so that's nice to hear. Birmingham has done a nice job with their downtown area with the redevelopment. It's been tremendous. You go up into Orion, Oxford, great downtowns have developed. Oxford's situation, they're going to repave, I know, the Lapeer Road going up there. It's too bad that we can't do a bypass to help with those gravel trucks that come running in and out of there, with all the gravel pits that they work on. Because it's a great spot, as is Lake Orion and downtown, the Clarkston area. We really you've done a great job here managing the city and the counties, making them grow. The only issue that we're going to run into is when you give a tax break to a large developer down in Detroit, they're gonna take businesses wherever they can get businesses. And that's not a good situation, and that's something that we have to neutralize somehow and keep our businesses that we have here and grow somehow, knowing that that tax break's going on down there. And as that big tower goes up, it's gonna be beautiful and it's a great situation, but we have to be protective of our businesses and stay in front and hold a lot of hands so that we don't lose them. That's, I think, one of our biggest concern. My biggest concern would be going forward.
So then we have Commissioner Powell, Jackson, I believe Markham. And so we'll start with Powell. Okay.
So this can kind of lead right into the questions that I have. I want to focus more on disadvantaged communities.
Sure.
That has a
Sure.
issue with the economy. What is your plan to move our county as a whole in technology, especially for our economically disadvantaged communities?
Well, there's a couple things we can look at, but just recently in lame duck, we passed a bill that was signed by the governor about 5G networks, which is the new technology where we'll do a lot of live streaming. And I think what we have to keep our eye open for, there's obviously some, autonomous vehicles, and this gets into Phil's department than economic development, but it's kind of a combination. Are there communities like Aponic that we could look at for looking at developing the autonomous vehicle market with the 5G network? But what other businesses will 5G bring into our community and bring them into an area like that needs development, but also can use the children and the schools that there to participate. I got behind Governor Snyder's Marshall Plan, which has a lot to do with skilled trades. I think it's a great program. And I also sponsored a bill for the sinking funds, the enhancement and sinking funds for technology and security upgrades for schools. And I was a big advocate for public school funding because our public schools need more money to train our children for the future, not just in skilled trades, but for job readiness. And so anything that we can do to bring business in to involve our schools, both at the K through 12 level or the community college and higher education level, I think is a benefit and will show economic growth.
And my next question is, can you tell me your vision for improving our urban economic development, of course, in disadvantaged communities?
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. We really have to focus on some of these areas that you're referring to. Like when I was a kid growing up in the Birmingham area, it was really divided into two parts, and the east side was more the blue collar, the tool and die people that were servicing that Ford plant that used to be at Coolidge and 15 Mile Road. Well, Hazel Park, for instance, was a big tool and die community that has died, and it's a great opportunity to develop that area into probably like more housing development that we can put people into, and that gets into probably more price competitive housing and businesses than some of the higher end communities. In Pontiac too, we have so much we could work with the mayor and the commission there, but you have to work with the local authority and get them involved no matter what you do. You just can't go out and try and bring something in. You have to kind of be partners no matter what you do.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Hello, thank you for coming to address us today. And I have a question concerning your experience with working with minority businesses and female-headed businesses,
Sure.
and your plan to help them succeed, to increase and succeed those entities.
Well, we did a lot of that in the furniture business. It was important to be engaged in partners with minority and women-owned businesses. And from early on in my career, and I worked for Hayworth out of Holland, Michigan, that was one of our big points. This goes back to the 80s, to make sure that we had minority-owned dealers, we call them, or retailers, as minority-owned and women-owned businesses. And you have to continue that as I went on to my own rep firm, and working with minority and women-owned businesses was very important to our growth. And we became partners with them and worked steadily, and it worked out very well. And it's something you have to develop a good business plan. You have to have those partners.
And then, I guess for the same population, when we talk about workforce development and job creation,
Yeah.
Irene Spanos, our former economic development director, stated that there was a skills gap,
Mhm.
training and skills gap.
Right.
What would be your plan to address that, and also forecast it toward increasing automation and losing jobs to that sector as well?
That's a very good point. There's a big gap in skilled trades right now. We're seeing it, and we need to really go back into the schools and get them in middle school and start training them and finding and identifying those students that will maybe enter into more of a skilled trades, whether it's welding, for instance, has always been a conversation, or coding is huge right now. We need people in coding industries, and I mean like computer coding. And but also, if you try and get a plumber now, it's hard to find a plumber. And plumbers make very good money and they have great benefits. We have to go back into the schools and start training our students at younger ages, not wait till they're in high school or later in high school. And I was always a big advocate, and that was part of the Marshall Plan that Governor Snyder came up with. But the ISD, the local ISD that we work with to identify that and find them funding, and businesses will come to help on those situations. And they just had, what was the name of that program you guys just had over at the that we just went to, with Jennifer Llewellyn did?
It was called My Career Quest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have a
10,000 student-wide that brought it in from 7 different counties. So it was irrespective of any designation, if you will, as it relates to background. And so a lot of participation from Wayne County, a lot of participation from Livingston County, Washtenaw County, Macomb County. So you get a sense of that. It was a broad interest.
And it was a night. I went to the overview of it. A great program where they brought students in from high schools from all over, and they met with people that were in the skilled trade business, and so they could see for themselves what opportunities lie ahead. And we need to expand more on that, and I need to learn more about that. And I would invite the commission to come in and see that for yourselves. I thought it was a tremendous program that the county put on. But you're right. We need to spend more time with the children, training them at an early age. And teaching them, you don't necessarily need a 4-year education. Skilled trades can create great job opportunities and benefits for you in life.
And the skilled trades sector has been identified, and we are trying to work on it with Ernest. A sector that we don't really address that much is the creative class. Do you see economic development spending time with cultivating those jobs, those opportunities, kind of like what they have? We don't have the Raleigh Theater Complex, or whatever the official name was going to be, or film credits, tax incentives anymore, but
Right.
just to help fund the artists, the starving artists, the economic development of actors and actresses and people that have to leave here to go to Atlanta. I'll say Atlanta and not Hollywood or New York, because Atlanta has come up. And we have that same type of opportunity here. What do you foresee in trying to stimulate that class of jobs?
Well, that's a good question, because there are a lot of students here, especially like my daughter was at U of M. They have a great arts program, and I was at Western. And Western had a great arts program, so there is an opportunity there. I did support the film studios and film subsidies until they started to get rid of them, and then I saw that kind of closing the door on it, and they weren't providing the funding that they had to provide the state to pay off the movie studios. But I thought it was a great opportunity for people to get engaged and see how filming and movies are made, and that's something that we can take a look at and work on, because we don't want those children to leave. I think, as Ms. Happy was saying, we need our children to stay here, so we have to create multiple opportunities, because it's a diverse environment that we live in. And so we have to be aware of whether it's arts and entertainment, and how do we do that and make it affordable.
Okay, I don't know if you know, we do have an arts competition contest, fine arts, held in Southfield at the Park West Gallery, but not much more.
Yeah.
So
I know Grand Rapids has been extremely successful, with their art program. The DeVos family got behind that, and it just brings out hundreds of thousands of people downtown Grand Rapids. And I always thought we should be doing the same thing here somehow.
Thank you. That's it for me for now. I might have some more.
Sure.
All right, Commissioner Markham. Thank you, Commissioner
Thank you,
Jackson.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. McCready. I have 3 topics that I'd like to speak with you about. The first, excuse me, is public transit. I am a big believer in public transit. I believe it's an essential component, excuse me, of a healthy economic growth strategy.
Yep.
I think our current system, our SMART system particularly, has 3 fatal flaws. The first is that local communities were allowed to opt out of the SMART system, which as it's grown over time has created big holes in the system. I come from Novi. We're a community of 63,000 people and we have no bus service. It's ridiculous. According to SEMCOG, 37,000 workers come to Novi every day. 28,000 workers leave Novi every day. Every one of them is in a car or on foot. And the stories of the workers who get off the bus and then have to walk a couple of miles in all kinds of weather to get to their jobs are absolutely true. I've stopped and picked those people up and taken them to work and asked them their situation and where they come from and where they're going. It's real. Employers like Ascension Providence Hospital, the malls, Suburban Showplace, they all have low-wage workers. And low-wage, I mean, you know, $12 an hour is pretty standard.
Yep.
They all struggle with transportation issues. Joe Hershey, who is the president of Ascension Providence out there, I spoke with him one day and said, do you think you need public transit? And the example he gave me was, it's not so much for the patients. He said, I have workers, 3 and 4 people sharing a car to get to work every day. And if the driver or the car is gone, I lose 4 or 5 people at a time. It's unsustainable as an employment model. So I have, that's one problem with it. Secondly, the fact that the millage has to be renewed every 4 years means we cannot do long-range planning and long-range strategizing, and I think that's really hurt SMART over the long term. It's also hurt our ability to have good conversations about the regional transit if we're going to integrate everything. And thirdly, I don't think there's much incentive for us to talk to what's going on in Detroit, and I think that's absolutely a mistake because a lot of the workers across the region come from all of the communities and we can't put boxes around our communities. So philosophically, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
I have 3 questions for you. Do you agree that public transit is essential to supporting the workers and the employers of Oakland County?
I do.
Okay, good. And what would you do? Obviously, Oakland County's kind of stood in the way the last couple of iterations of this. So what would you do or suggest to clear some of those roadblocks to Oakland County's participation? And related to that, would you be willing to promote and pursue changes to legislation at the state level that would solve some of those issues that
Oh,
we have?
absolutely. And I brought that up when I met with the transportation people in Lansing, that we need to redo Act 51. And there's an item in there for public transportation. And I said, that's where you need to go, increase your funding. We need to open up Act 51 and keep more money that Oakland County is sending out and bring those dollars back, not just to fix our roads, because it's a Christmas tree. It starts at the state, it goes down to the county, and then the local level. But there's also a line item in there for public transit, and we need to increase that funding because we're sending so much dollars out of Oakland County. We need to keep them here, and not just to fix our roads and our infrastructure, but to improve and help the funding for the mass transit. But on the local level, for instance, I was on the city of Bloomfield Hills, and we had SMART come and talk to us. And when we were at the time now an $8.5 million budget, they wanted $1 million a year to bring service into our county, into our community. And we said, well, we really can't afford that. And I said, let's try it. Can we try it for a year, and we'll pay you $250,000, and let's see how it goes. Well, they turned us down. And we were disappointed because we had just what you talked about, people that are working maybe in the restaurants there that need the transportation, that where they stop on either side of Woodward, you know, at Hickory Grove or at 16 Mile, and we were trying to close that gap. But unfortunately, we couldn't close the financial gap. It was too big of a dollar number for a small budget that the city runs. So we did look at doing that. And then as for running a millage in the county, it's up to the taxpayer at the end of the day. If we bring them a good proposal for the taxpayer to vote on it and approve something like that. And
Well,
so
I-
I wouldn't necessarily say that Oakland County was a hindrance, but I understand with the opt-outs, how you get into that. And I didn't have a problem with the opt-outs, because every community has maybe a different objective, and we have to recognize that. But if, I read the RTA report that was voted on, was that 2016? And even in the report, there were gaps when you got north of Royal Oak of the ridership. So I told you I'm living at Lone Pine at Telegraph, and I'm in a condo right at the northeast corner. And when I'm in my condo, I get on my cell phone a little notice that the bus will be at the stop that's right in front of my door in 11 minutes. So I was telling Brooks about it. So I said, Brooks, come over to my house. We'll have a drink, and let's get on that bus. Let's ride the bus. Let's see where it goes and see what it's like. And he said, okay, I'll do it.
I think that's a great suggestion. Mr. Patterson came out to Novi about 2 years ago. We were opening a new feature at Providence Hospital. And he was very happy that that was happening, as were we all. And he said right in that meeting, maybe Oakland County should put a bus stop for you out in front of the hospital. Well, that would be okay if we had buses running to Novi, you know, so.
But
There's
Commissioner
a
Markham-
lot of conversation, I think, that has to happen.
Right.
I believe the election that might have taken place in 2018, but was stopped back in June, July timeframe.
Right.
I really believe if the leadership felt that there was something and got in front of it and said, we support this, that it would have happened. And I think we and the economic development part of Oakland County has a real role to play in that. I think it's essential.
And just, Commissioners, just so you know, if for Lansing, I'm going to be a big advocate to open up Act 51 to keep dollars here, and public transit will be a big part of that.
Good, that's good to hear. The second item I have concern about, you already spoke about a little bit, the tax incentives. And so as a local official, what I have seen in my experience is, okay, Novi, where I'm from, we gave a big tax break to Company X, and they brought people from Farmington into Company X, okay? And then about 3 months later, Company Y over there from Novi moved over to Oak Park because there were tax incentives. And I'm sitting there going, we're giving away tax dollars in Oakland County to move companies in Oakland County. This is not making sense to me. That's a problem.
Yep.
So you answered one of my questions, which is under what circumstances you would support them. My other question is, what do you consider an appropriate community benefit kind of thing for tax incentives beyond brownfield redevelopment? But are there other things that you think that communities should be able to ask for if they are giving tax relief to a company that's coming? What I've seen quite often is a company comes and says, we're gonna bring all these jobs,
Right.
and that's it. And there's even very loose checkups on whether all those jobs really came or not, and what was the impact of that. I'd like to see, you know, if we're gonna give them a tax break, well, where's the park, or where's the, you know, welding classes in the high school, or
I agree.
whatever. So what do you think are some kinds of community benefits that we should be thinking about?
Well,
for tax
we should
benefits?
probably have a deeper conversation about this, because we don't want to play, I call it checkers, with economic development tools. We're moving this one just over here. That's not economic development, right? And you're right, parks were always a big issue in Lansing, but in the city of Bloomfield Hills, we would like a park. But if you're going to bring in a new business, can that business bring in and put in a park for the community because they get a benefit? You know, there's a benefit there. I agree with you. Yeah, but I don't want to play checkers with moving a business from here to here, and that's what I was referring to that one tax incentive that Lansing gave that Dan Gilbert's taken advantage of. Is he recruiting businesses away from the Tri-County area? Most likely because he needs to fill this building, but we can't let that happen. We need to protect those businesses, and I agree. Let's have a further conversation on what we can do to improve that without taking from others.
Thank you. The third topic I wanted to go into very quickly is, I looked at the economic development strategies and Advance Oakland and all of that, and I'm not seeing as much green infrastructure development as I think we need. certainly we need to be moving the county into renewable energy in as many aspects as we can, but also driving our businesses, our homes, and all of that. And there's a lot of jobs in green infrastructure moving forward. So what do you see as a means to incorporate that into Oakland County's development in a more aggressive way?
I agree with you, Commissioner. We need to protect our green space. And Lansing, there was a bill to take away local control of that, and I was objected to it. I worked the legislator to stop it. We can't do that. It's local control. I always wanted to keep local control on it. The other issue was we were going to address tipping fees. And the tipping fees in Michigan, I think, are like 38 cents a ton. And what that is when the people bring their trash to us, you know, and what they have to pay to dump their trash here. We need to change that. We need to legislate and fix that problem. We are so far below our surrounding communities in Canada. That's why everybody's bringing our trash here, and I think we need to address that. I know the recyclable people aren't crazy about that idea, but really we need to protect our green space, not make them dumping grounds. We need to allow local communities to set standards that they want to whether it's a certain amount of trees or green space, and we need to support that. And I'm happy to work with the commission to develop good programs and legislate for it in Lansing to protect it.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I have a couple questions for you. You talked about skilled trades, which that's near and dear to me. That's why I am where I'm at today in my life. With the, we all know that prevailing wage was overturned, which lowered the wages for all men and women in the skilled trades, giving tax dollars to out-of-state workers, which lowers spending in our communities and take away money from our skilled residents, as well as their families. Is it true that you oppose prevailing wage?
No, I supported. No, yes, I did. I opposed prevailing wage. I did. Yes.
All right, and what steps are you going to take to ensure that our employees working in Oakland County are being paid fairly? And then how are you going to ensure our local residents and businesses don't feel the impact of that overturn?
Well, when we met with the unions about the prevailing wage, what we talked about is that we want to be competitive in our bidding process. It had to do with schools and roads, basically. And what I said is, why don't we then, if you're concerned about that, and then it had to go with dollars to training. I think that they were concerned about losing dollars for their training programs. What I suggested is then why don't we create a bill that would help protect the Michigan workers from outside states coming in and bidding, and that if you're in state and you're bidding on a project, you get a certain percentage advantage on those bids versus an out-of-state company. So that was my trying to balance the loss of the prevailing wage and still allow the Michigan workers a little bit of an advantage, so that we aren't sending we're not giving away jobs to, say, people out of Ohio or Florida that are just coming up to bid on these projects.
So you hit on dollars for training. You said with the unions?
That's what the unions were telling me. With the prevailing wage, they used a lot of that money, extra money they were receiving, to go into the training programs.
So was that for, you're just saying unions as a general, or the skilled trade? Like, I'm trying to understand what you mean by dollars for training, because I know skilled trades, sorry, go ahead, you can answer.
Yeah, we met with multiple unions that came in to talk to us, and what they were mostly were saying is the dollars that they're going to lose when we get rid of prevailing wage is dollars you're taking from us for training programs. And I said, well, we'll have to work on something that we can do to help those training programs. So I thought one of them would be to create an advantage for Michigan-based companies when they bid on these public projects, that they would have a certain percentage advantage going in the door.
I also want to ask you about apprenticeship as a skilled tradesman and a graduate apprentice from the Operating Engineers Local 324 apprenticeship as a certified crane operator.
Yes.
And I consider the apprenticeship as the other four-year degree, right? You could work and go to school at the same time and have a good job and live well. And I know you were quoted, I looked up a few quotes that you said, which I do agree with. Our students should have the opportunity to learn about all the valuable options in school, after high school. Michigan is the national leader providing skilled trade careers. It is time we lay all options on the table for our students as we prepare them to be successful in the workforce. which I definitely like these quotes. It says, obtaining a college degree is great, but it's not the only pathway to a career. And then finally, all Michigan students deserve a chance to thrive in a development brighter than our future, or bright in their future. So, like, I like those quotes, but what is your plan to grow the skilled trades and fill the apprenticeships with prevailing wage overturn, the lower wages, facing graduate people thinking about going to an apprenticeship, they're facing the lower wage to go into, right? It's no longer that prevailing wage gone, so the wage is lower. So what is your plan to, put them in that position or help them along, as well as helping out the companies with these out-of-state contractors coming in, taking the local money back to out-of-state. Then we're potentially going to have less money with our local contractors to have an opportunity to have an apprenticeship, to fill positions. Even if we do work with the high schools, there might not be anything there after they graduate.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chairman Miller, I kind of alluded to some of that in a conversation with an advantage for Michigan-based companies on a bidding process from outside companies, but also learning a skilled trade while you're still in middle school, developing that versus pushing them into a four-year degree. I think that's important, but we need to fund our schools more adequately, not just for a more academic or a STEM education, but also for skilled trades. When I graduated from Birmingham Seaholm, and back when I was at Seaholm, half the kids went through voc ed, and they learned engine repair, transmission repair, beauty salon things, and they went into those careers and had great careers. We got away from that, and we were pushing all of our children, it seemed, into the colleges and universities, and so that's why we have a gap today, in my opinion, that we need to go back and fund these programs, and the legislature needs to fund more of these programs into a skilled trade, just so, like you said, for the apprentice program, so that we can teach them, and then we work collectively, whether it's with a local union or with businesses, so that they can get up and learn that trade and service the apprentice, and then move into the chair, the seat that you're in now. And I think, that's what we can do to help fund those programs and make sure they're in place.
I appreciate that. So I could only speak for the local that I'm with, is our training is 100% funded by its members and the contractors, so that's where prevailing wage would take away from that. It's because we don't have any federal tax dollars or any state tax dollars, right? So I hear what you're saying, but that wouldn't help out,
If you had an advantage, though, on a bidding project from an outside company?
Pardon me?
If you had an advantage and you're a Michigan-based company and you're bidding on building a new school or road, and you had an advantage on the bidding process, the state gave you a couple percentage points advantage from an out-of-state company coming in. I mean, that's the biggest concern, that we have, is we don't want out-of-state companies coming taking the dollars away. We want companies in Michigan developing, jobs here, homes here, and supporting their local communities. That's where we need to go.
Well, and I agree with you. And I guess it's on the point where I know we're focused because I'm with my trade and stuff like that. Other local companies do not have that option, right, to have the training facility. They might be a small mom and pop that's bidding on curbs for the road or sidewalk cutting. So that's where they would have a disadvantage. This is for the companies as a whole in Oakland County. So that's where I was looking at. I don't want to get watered down just because I'm part of the other side there.
Sure.
And then the other question I have is, with the massive layoff with the auto workers coming soon, what is your plan to put these workers back to work in Oakland County?
You have to retrain them. So there are programs right now through the community colleges that the state funds that allows workers that are laid off to go into the community colleges and get retrained for other jobs. And we may have to now expand that, because I forget what the dollar figure is we put into it, and we looked at expanding that before, I think a few years ago, but we stopped it. But now that with these massive layoffs that we're going to see, retraining is going to be very important, and whether it's a skilled trade or a computer trade of some sort or a high-tech trade, We're gonna have to go back, and most likely through the community colleges, and which I think Oakland County would benefit greatly from, in offering those programs and getting them out to make sure people are aware of the programs that they sign up for.
And then on that one is, so we have hundreds of companies in Oakland County that are in the manufacturing for the auto.
Yep.
What was your plan to help them out? Because a lot of them may have to consider to shut the doors because of this reason.
I think we're gonna have to look at each one individually, but I think if we make them aware of retraining programs that are available or developing other retraining programs, it will be very important. But right now, our community colleges are receiving additional funding to do that, and we may have to look at increasing it, and we have to see what those layoffs are going to be.
Thank you. So I have no further questions right now, but any other have questions? I know Commissioner Jackson and then Chairman Dave Woodward.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. McCready. You just mentioned you're supporting jobs here and homes here that will support our local economy. On your website, I read, I don't know if it was your campaign website, but I think it was recent. It said, as a state representative, it stated if the private sector can do something more efficiently and economically than government, then we should outsource those tasks. How deep is your conviction to outsourcing and privatization versus the needs of the workers and trying to retain good paying Oakland County jobs? Because it seems like we're shifting, we're playing checkers in our speech and what we're even talking about right now. So if we begin to outsource, that adds to more people looking. Okay, how does that really help?
I think we'd have to look at each individual area that you might be referring to. When we looked at privatizing some areas of government, nothing's really coming to my mind right now, but we're always looking to keep our spending down in government. So when I was in the city of Bloomfield Hills, for instance, we outsourced our legal services, we outsourced our engineering, our planning. So we contracted for those services. And if we can contract in other areas for these professional services, I think it's an advantage to look at them and see. And we were using Oakland County-based companies. We weren't going outside of the Oakland County area. So as long as we're using companies that are based in the state or in the local community, and we can outsource at a lower price and get maybe even, as good if not better services, we can always look at those opportunities individually.
I guess I'm just speaking from a standpoint of the needs of the worker, the human being, versus the entity. Yeah, we can outsource and it might be more efficient and economically sane for the government, but then how do you look at it, how it can affect our communities?
Well, I think, as long as we're providing employment with benefits, that's really what we want here. We don't want contracted employees that don't have benefits. We want employees that are receiving pay along with the benefit, and that's what's important. And whether we have it within the government or within a private entity, whichever we can develop and make it a longer lasting, because if they're a private entity and you're contracted out, let's say engineering services, and you grow your business and you're doing multiple communities, they're providing a service and they're sharing knowledge from one community to another. I don't see any real setback.
So you feel, so your conviction is as long as the employees are still made whole in the retraining or retained by a corporate entity that still provides benefits and keeps them at the same level?
I think yeah, or give them more opportunity to make money. And I mean, right now everybody, as long as there's a benefit involved, I mean, it's just not getting paid. You have to have, you have to have a compensation package. I think that's important.
I don't see that always happening with outsourcing. I see that as a big complaint and a big concern in regards to that whole scenario. So that's why I use the word conviction.
Yeah.
Because some things have to deal with, people's lives, and we have to really make decisions at times, and most times, that's how I try to, based upon that aspect.
Yeah, well, we ran into a situation, I served on the board for Angels Place, which is a home, multiple homes for adult children that have mental disabilities. And, you know, they're born into a life that they have challenges. And so as the parents get older, they're trying to find a way for their children to be taken care of because they're going to move on, you know, and what's going to happen with their adult children. So Angels Place takes in these adult children at 26 years old. Well, then we have helpers throughout the day and in the evening, you know, like a home person that stays in there and or takes them to their job, which may be like working at a Walmart or Kroger, you know, bagging groceries or doing carts, you know, picking up carts. And we were paying them, I think they were getting like $14, $15 an hour with great benefits. And transportation, helping them to get to the job, you know, with vans. And a lot of it, well, we get some public funding and some is private funding. But it was very difficult, Commissioner, to hold on to them because even though we gave them the good benefits and they were getting between $12 and $15 an hour, they moved on. They wanted to try and make more money. And I don't, you know, it's great that they want to go make more money, but there are opportunities out there that where the benefit is extremely important. And sometimes, you know, you can't second guess people, but it was a great environment for people to work in, very a good compensation package. So people make decisions on the job that they take, and all we can do is try and bring in solid organizations and support them with training and programs that hopefully they like to work to retain workers. And we did that at Angels Place. How can we retain workers? So we tried to increase the pay and keep the good benefit, you know, of like the health care coverage and a 401k. But you're not always successful. You do the best you can. But I just believe that sometimes you can outsource opportunities and allow people still to grow and have a good compensation program.
All right, thank you. Chairman Woodward?
Thank you, Mr. Miller. So some on this board have heard me talk about privatization. And in almost all circumstances, that the person whose job's been privatized makes less money. And it's in almost all circumstances at the state level. I think probably the biggest disaster was the outsourcing of the prison food service.
Yeah,
and it was a complete and utter disaster. And the person who in that scenario is the corporation. Because the cost, at the end of the day, didn't save the state any money. And the only thing, I mean, and all the workers made less money, and the corporations made more money. And I bring that up into the context, and we can have a philosophical debate, privatize, don't privatize, and things like that. But I think, I mean, what it does, and I think Commissioner Jackson and Commissioner Miller's questions, and I've struggled with this economic development, I mean, just economic development strategy. I'll talk from like a statewide level, that we are too hyper-focused on the needs of corporations and not enough focus on the needs of workers. As far as I'm concerned, the only thing I care about when it comes to economic development is good-paying jobs so that people can earn a good living and support their family and really make the 61 communities of Oakland County, make them great, wonderful places to live. Everything else is second. I don't care about the shareholders. I don't care about Wall Street. I don't care about any of that. I care about the workers. And I'm realizing the company needs to make profit to be able to make workers, and all, and those considerations can be brought in. But too often we lose sight of that, and I guess that's why I want to come back to. I really believe that we need an economic development strategy that focuses is much more worker focused, people focused, and less corporate focused. And what's concerning is, so coming back to prevailing wage. The cost, all these skilled trade workers in Michigan, many that live here in Oakland County, are making less now. They're making less money. That's less money to support their family. It's less money to prepare for retirement. I'm a little troubled about this idea because it wasn't just, and I appreciate your attempt to try to want to make it better by trying to address the trade issue. I mean, the training aspect of thing. That's not the main reason. The main reason is, I mean, these are people who are professionals and trained to do a job, and now they make less. And since 1965, I think it's, I mean, we had prevailing wage and now that we don't. I think we're a little hypocritical. I mean, one side of our mouth we say we need more skilled trades, and on in the business we need more skilled tradespeople. And now the other side of the mouth now we say, but we're going to pay you less to do the same work. All many times in which the person who's going to benefit in this is the company that will make maybe more profit by not paying by paying less wages, and so that's concerning. Coming back to the wage issue, and this is also something I'd like to address. Like in the last month or so, I mean during lame duck, another thing happened in which the legislature took action to literally lower the minimum wage in Michigan that was adopted. Now I know why it was adopted. It was adopted to keep it off the ballot. Unless that wasn't the case, and you can correct me. But then we lowered the minimum wage. Then we talked about workers, and then we took away paid sick time. That's concerning, and I guess I want you to address like what, from an economic development strategy, give me assurance that workers are going to be a central focus of our development strategy, in lieu of opposing prevailing wage, opposing increase in the minimum wage, and opposing paid sick time for all workers.
Okay. Well, that's a very good point. I'll start with the legislation that was passed. We actually were protecting really small companies of 50 or less employees from the sick time, I believe it was, because the guaranteed sick time for them could put them out of business. We were afraid to put them out of business. And on the minimum wage, we heard from many restaurant workers and owners in Oakland County. I had many of them come to me. Even the workers came to me and said, we don't want to do this tip program. It'll cost us, and that's not how we want to work. We did actually increase the minimum wage, but at a different schedule than what was proposed in the ballot proposals. So when you talk about steering jobs or taking jobs at lower cost, and let's just take a building, a simple block building that's publicly going to be built, and let's say we can build it for less money. Does that then give us more money to spend to build other buildings somewhere else? Or if we have to put it into roads, does that give us more money to fix more roads, for instance? And we're doing more public-private partnerships. You know, we talked about that a lot in Lansing, doing public-private partnerships. And what's the balance there, Commissioner? You know, there's a balance that we have to walk the line, because I agree with you. We want to employ as many people as possible with a good wage and a benefit package so that they can live and provide for themselves and their families. I agree with you.
So, I guess, on that point, as it relates to prevailing wage, that's just not the experience. That's not the experience around the country, particularly when federal dollars are involved. Still going to be a prevailing wage, project. That when we've seen these things come in, often you'll end up with lesser trained, less skilled workers to do the job. The very thing that I think that you genuinely try to protect against is like this influx of out-of-state labor coming in, is exactly what comes when you basically break the floor and lower that minimum wage for skilled trades. And so as it relates to safety, quality of work, all those types of things, I think we fundamentally undermine those. And then at the back end, you've got the most skilled trained workers in our skilled trade people in Michigan, and we've made that job less attractive because we've lowered the wages, and that's a problem. I do want to come back to the minimum wage issue, and we can talk about the tip credit. First, phasing $12 minimum wage, I think the minimum wage should be $15, period. But taking the phasing in a $12 minimum wage into the next decade is embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're a laughing stock around the state. The other thing, we actually lowered the tipped wage. So we had a tipped wage that got increased a few years back, and we've actually lowered it to make it even less. And why all these things are alarming to me is that we exist, the economy's been booming, job creation, disproportionately the number of jobs in the frontline economy are these lower wage jobs, and it's just harder to get together. And yes, we have a low unemployment number, but in some ways we accomplish that is that, to me, it rings hollow when people have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to be able to make ends meet. And we've got to reconcile this. That this is a losing proposition long-term. As I know you're aware, I mean, from a policy-making, space, that wages have been stagnant for middle class and lower class, working class workers for 40 years. Productivity is higher than it's ever been. Corporations have more profits than they've ever had, and yet workers are not getting their fair piece of the pie. And so I guess my last question is, what do you envision from an economic development vision? What do you envision doing, helping, leading to change that, to raise wages for those who are on the front line of the economy and those lower skilled jobs, which we need. Home care worker. We have an explosion of elderly that's going to be in our county who need home care worker, and it pays crap. Without benefits, without paid sick time, and all these other types of things. And we got to address that. We've got to raise wages for working people. Otherwise, the American dream is going to be achievable for fewer and fewer people.
Well, and let me go back too, because you talked about the prisons, and we righted the wrong there, because that became a real problem, and so it came back into the unions to handle it, because it was proven to be a big mistake. So we fixed that problem. But when you talk about like home health care, and I'll use Angel's Place as an example because I have personal experience with it. They were getting good wages, I think, but a great benefit package, but we couldn't keep them there. And if you want to go into the home health care for seniors, that's something that we may have to look at in regulating and making sure, because if we're moving people around, we don't want to move workers in and out of those positions. That makes other liabilities for the seniors. So that's something that we'll have to address and take a look at. But I met with multiple, like McDonald's owners that are having a hard time keeping employees. They start them at like $9.50, $10 an hour. Now it'll go up. And some of them get a little bit of a benefit package, and they get a free meal, and they'll even get transportation back and forth to work. It's hard to keep them. But if we start raising the rate too high, what changes will then the companies make to deal with a smaller workforce? So there's a balance there that we have to always be aware of, that we don't want to maybe use technology and take away people's jobs. So what's the balance?
Right. Well, like I said, a business is going to use technology if it can make them more profit. The business is profit driven, and we accept that. There are a lot of the barriers in this example: reliable transportation to get to work, family responsibility, that they can't take off time to take care of their sick kid or elderly parent. Fundamentally, if we cannot, adhere to a shared value that if you work full time, you shouldn't live in poverty. It's messed up. If minimum wage workers 50 years ago, if their buying power just kept up with inflation, it would be much higher than it is now. And somehow we find a way to justify it's okay to keep it lower because it could cause all these other problems. No, it's not okay. And their buying power is not able to provide those basic needs to survive. And so that, somewhere in all of this, in all the economic development, and then when I led off with all these tools that we do to try to attract business and attract investment, a lot of these other things, it needs to be reconciled, and arguably should be hyper-focused on the improving conditions for workers and raising wages for workers, so that those at the very bottom rung, those at the top rung have been doing awesome over the last 20 years. The ones at the bottom have been falling behind. And unfortunately, there's no, the future doesn't look good there.
Well, I think education and training in schools, I think, is where we need to continue to develop and focus our energy to help relieve the gap that we're seeing. And if you talk about like home health care, I agree with you that we need to protect the seniors and then protect those jobs, in that order. But let's say if you take like a fast food restaurant, they can modernize and start using, other equipment than people. We don't want to force people out of a job. But in home health care, I would agree with you because that's a hands-on job where that's people to people. So there are different circumstances for different industries, but if we can train the children or the people in school while they're in school with like job readiness, whether it's skilled trade or some higher education, that's where we were missing our focus. We have to go back to.
Well, let me about the school. Like our kids who are graduating today are smarter, more savvy, more technology inclined than any generation before them. I mean, I guess so, and yes, more training, more education, great. But I'm just saying that the people who are leaving are the smartest and most ready for this workforce and are completely disrupting our normal system of things. That's not just the answer. We are up against massive forces of automation, artificial intelligence, and all these other types of things, and those are realities we got to confront. But at the same time, that if you work and you work full time, you shouldn't live in poverty, and that needs to be like that's the line. And when we're failing, we've got to make considerations to address that. Mr. Chair, I literally have just one more line of questioning. This comes to the local economy because I was happy to hear about this idea of giving preference to certain vendors for consideration. Right. Something that I've long championed in this county. We'll continue to champion is the importance of investing in our local economies. Really helping support local independent businesses. These are businesses that are rooted in the community. They're the ones who are really the active members of the local Chamber of Commerce. Right. They're the ones that make a community, the flavor and soul of a community. Yet it's very hard to compete with the big dogs and the big corporate operations. Government contracts generally going to these big operations that have the personnel to go after those things. Would you be supportive of putting in some buy local preferences in terms of county contracting? We've got $100 million of contracting every annual year. It would seem to me that if we can give that money, if we have a choice and it's really on the edge, that giving that business to a Oakland County business before somewhere else, that money circulates in our local economy a lot more. So can you speak to that?
I agree.
Oh, that's easy. Okay.
We have any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, and one last one, and then it comes to regional cooperation. I know we've taken about time, and Mr. McCree, thank you for your time and indulging us. I said in our opening meeting, I am a strong champion for regional cooperation. I know you're aware, I think you're attending a meeting very soon with the new Detroit Regional Partnership, this effort to leading companies, large companies, CEOs in the area coming together trying to figure out how do we develop a shared economic story and an economic strategy to attract outside investment to the region. As you know, our executive said he's been invited to the board, has refused at this moment. Do you agree with that decision? Why or why not?
With what decision?
With Brooks's decision not to sit on the board.
Of the mayor?
Oh, the Detroit Regional Partnership.
For the mayor not to sit on that commission, you said, or what?
The mayor, our county executive.
Oh, our county executive?
Yeah. He has decided at this juncture he does not want to sit on the board.
Do I get to sit on the board?
I don't know.
I would enjoy that opportunity if I could sit on that board. And I know many of those people, and I've worked with them. And I think it's as important to participate in that. And I'm not sure if it needs to be our county executive or it's the chairman of the Oakland County Commission, or if it's Phil Bertolini or Tim as deputy executives, but we need to have a representation there.
Great, thank you. All right, Mr. Chair, I apologize. I have one more question.
No worries.
That's 3 more questions. Yes. We talked a lot about the economic development stuff, and we talked about technology too. We talked about the future, covered a lot of ground. Another area, and Deputy Executive Meyer, I brought this up, housing. Affordable housing is a growing challenge across this entire region. Yep. You'll be overseeing our housing and home improvement division. Last year, we got notice from the Department of Housing and Urban Development raising concerns about, and I quote, like the discriminatory effect on non-white household as a result of our use of CDBG, because we weren't using any dollars on rent assistance. And this is, just full disclosure, I'm a huge champion. We are going to find a way to invest in rental assistance. There are 2 reasons. One, I think it perpetuates a a dialogue that's been harmful to those regions. But secondly, I think, what is your ideas and what's your views on not only supporting rental assistance, but improving housing in this county, particularly for low-income individuals? It's the whole spectrum, all the way down to homelessness, which is also a challenge and a growing challenge in this area.
Right. I'm a little bit familiar with the HUD program, not in depth, but I'm starting to get more familiar with it. And some communities receive more dollars, many more dollars than other communities, which creates a problem. I talked to Earl Pileski, who's the director of MISHDA right now, and he's struggling finding investors to come in and build low-income housing. And they were doing it in Detroit, but now with the high rents that they're getting and the costs they're getting, that's drying up because everybody wants to own it, versus they want to sell it versus renting it out. So there's some challenges that have been created because of a strong economy, but yet we have to find a way through those challenges, because you're right, we need to provide housing for low-income people. I agree 100%, as well as the health care for those people. We need to help them, protect them, and give them an opportunity to succeed in life. We can't put them out on the street.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the commissioners? I just have one more. So our economic structures to help workers flourish, better the quality of life, which will in turn better our companies in our county. So you voted to take away paid sick days away from millions of workers, and voted to decrease minimum wage and tipped employees. You cap they can't make any more than the cap after a certain time, which in turn, it was a gut to minimum wage hike, paid sick days that would help our residents in Oakland County provide and take care of their families, and it took away from the voters' request to put this on the ballot, and took away the American dream. If we work hard, you can take care of your families and live well. You voted to lower the prevailing wage for skilled trades, which eliminated the requirement for state to pay prevailing wage on state construction projects, cutting the paychecks of workers across the state, not just in the county, and opening Michigan projects out of state, as Chair Woodward said, which was lower skills, safety issues, taking money out of the county and the state. So that, help me understand, how I would, why I would support, this appointment, when the records show it's hostile. You've been hostile to workers.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think I'm hostile towards workers. I listened to the businesses and the people that came to me specifically from Oakland County that said, we can't afford this. I also had workers come to me and said the same thing. I didn't have many people come to me from Oakland County and argue against what we were going to do. So I was listening to our constituents, and I voted accordingly to our constituents. And I will remind you that when it came to public schools and public universities, I was a champion in Lansing for more money and more funding for their programs, as well as protecting their pension benefits and their health care benefits, as well as the people who lived at over 133% of poverty, to give them health care for themselves and their family so that they can provide and get on their feet. So I don't think I was doing any harm to people other than creating a more competitive environment. And as I said, I would like to work on legislation to give local contractors the ability to bid on projects with an advantage over out-of-state companies.
I guess we could agree to disagree. Commissioner Jackson?
I'd like a point of clarification first. So the process today is to put forth our questions and then to vote on to appoint him today.
Well, so I didn't mean to cut you off. So it's the recommend or not recommend to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay. Well, I'm feeling that I'm not really ready to make that decision today, and I'd like to make a motion to postpone that vote.
So we have a motion to postpone the vote by Commissioner Jackson.
I'll second it.
Second, we have a second by Commissioner Powell on the question.
Well, from what I've heard today, it doesn't really convince me enough for my position to vote for or against Mr. McCready, as well as I did not receive a copy of his resume. I don't know if any of us did. I don't know if we're privy to that, but that's another reason. I would like to really see your full background above and beyond the furniture manufacturing experience. Oh, okay. At the call of the chair.
Okay. So,
To pick a, yes. To pick a.
it's indefinite,
with the
postpone
chair pick a
indefinite
space.
until there's a date set. That's my understanding, right?
He decides when
I
it
guess
comes back.
I have a question on the close. I believe you guys all asked great questions, and I believe Mr. McCready answered all those questions. I would hope that you guys should be able to, based on his questions, be able to make a decision today. So, outside of that, I'm not sure how much more you're gonna allow him to investigate. He's a public official, been out there, he has nothing to hide, everything he's voted on is out there. You know, only that may not be is some of his private life, which he may or may not be willing to share. You know, his business, he's been pretty open with everything, so I'm not sure why you're looking to postpone this one. I think there's more than enough information out there to make a decision on recommending or not recommending Mr. McCready.
Well, I disagree. As I brought forth the request to postpone, and partially is because I like to do some more investigating, maybe talk to some constituents in his district that he represented. I know people in that area, as well as maybe to review your resume.
So definitely appreciate your comment, Commissioner Spiz. We do have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jackson to postpone indefinitely, and we seconded by Commissioner Powell.
I'm fine with postponing.
Okay. So I guess in order to take a, what's that? Any other discussion? So we'll take the roll call.
Markham,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Wypert,
No, for the reason that I think it has to be a date certain.
Jackson,
Yes.
Spiz,
No.
Miller.
Yes.
4 yeas, 2 nays.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Woodward is ex officio member. 5 yeas, 2 nays.
Commissioner, just so you know, the resume was submitted to the Board of
Yes,
Commissioners.
it
And
was.
for some reason, it didn't end up in the packet, but the resume was submitted by HR to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay.
Correct.
So we have I'm sorry.
So it's 5 yeas, 2 nays.
5 yeas, 2 nays, so the motion passes. So we'll postpone it indefinitely. We'll definitely get a date out to you as soon as possible. And then, that's the, so we have to, yeah, A through B on the agenda. We have the communications for the Clemis and for the Waterford memo, the public hearing. I receive and file motion. Motion is by Commissioner Wiper.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Markham. Do we have just a vote, yes or no? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Ayes have it, so that's passed. And then we have, is there any further business to come before this committee? Hearing that without objection, I declare that there's no, we have adjourned the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?